Well, first of all, welcome, and thank you for coming. We promised that we would put together an event, and you'll hear lots of real detailed stories from our clients talking about the experiments they're running, the progress they're making, and the impact that they're seeing in their markets. When we launched Accenture Digital, we wanted to build out capabilities that would look at the problems from all angles. So we started building this organization called Accenture Interactive, which is now the largest digital marketing agency in the world. This year, approximately $10 billion in revenue. And as you can imagine, with a company that size, they've got a wide variety of expertise in understanding how consumers behave, how we interact with them, but most importantly, what they've become as an experience agency, and the first experience agency in the world, is an organization focused exclusively on the question of how do we create the best possible experiences in each industry. Now that means for a patient trying to get health care, or a student being educated, or a citizen interacting with their government, a fan going to a sporting event, or yes, a customer transacting with a business. And of course that applies in business to consumer, and it also applies in business to business. So we've got a wide variety of examples of people thinking about the experiences that your customers are having and asking the question, what does the future look like? Now, if we think about these experiences and we measure the progress that's making in every industry that we can see in each industry, each one of you can think about something that's happened to you in the past week, which is a friction point of experience. You stood in a line, you waited, you got incorrect information, it took longer than it should have to actually complete your intention. And so part of the design of experiences is actually thinking about why that's true. What are the barriers? And the barriers are not always in the front office. It's not always the interaction point with our customer. Sometimes it's the mid and the back office. Sometimes it's the environment around us, the theater that we're in, the city that we're traveling through. So what we've tried to do is take a very broad look and think about what's going on. So we start with marketing. And marketing has become technology enabled. So if we looked back 5 or 6 years ago, people might have described marketing as maybe 80% art and 20% science. And today they would flip that. They would say it's a technology enabled, data enabled, insight enabled function, and the tools, the techniques that we use in marketing have matured. And in fact, one of the things that's changed is now we have data, we can predict a lot of activity, and sometimes, if we can do it in the right time, in near real time, we can actually influence the behaviors of individuals that we're trying to serve so that they do have a better experience. Of course, everyone has mobile devices and everyone's getting connected, so we can talk to them. And we're not talking to them through a simple device. We now have a very rich user interface where we can provide graphics, videos, short form content, and all sorts of different formats that enable them to understand our messages, and also, in addition to understanding what we're trying to communicate, they can communicate back. And if we listen, and we listen closely, of course, we can take that information and we can craft an even better experience. One of the things that we also expect is that if we're going to have a range of experiences, we could potentially be able to support what we would have previously described as the long tail in our market, the consumers where our cost models were not efficient or effective, but now they could be. And now we could serve them with an operating model that's profitable and brings those experiences to a broader set of our community. And when you're trying to deliver healthcare or transportation services or child protection services or anything like that, the ability to address the long tail is very important. But we can take all the lessons from serving the long tail in those markets and we can start to apply them in our consumer markets as well. We can also use platforms, data flows, artificial intelligence tools that other people built. We didn't invest in them. We didn't spend the billions of dollars to create the infrastructure and the services and the platform economics that exist. But we can ride over the top of those investments, and we can do things like change the payment experience. Right? So there's a lot of opportunity to take advantage of what other people have done, mix it with what we do, and hopefully improve the experience that people are having. And even while we're doing that, even while we're creating better experiences, we're also dropping the cost of the price of the goods and services that are in the market. Almost every market we see is in a flat or a deflationary pricing market. So even while the experience and the interactions are becoming richer, the price of the service is not going up. That hasn't happened before in business, right? It's always been a trade-off that says if I want to get a better product or service, it's going to be more expensive. Well, today, that's not always true. In fact, sometimes quite the opposite is true, because we're relying on platform and scale economics and the sharing economy, the gigster economy, and a bunch of other components to create a completely different price-to-value ratio. And in addition to doing that at the individual level, we can start to do it for groups. The groups could be the citizens of a city. It could be members of the healthcare community who share the same disease pattern. But we can start to address societal problems and provide better access to education, better access to healthcare, better access to anything that society finds valuable. So these are some of the promises of what's going on. So the question is, how do we do it? What are the tools, the techniques that we can apply? The first thing, as I said, we try to take a broad perspective on how you approach these problems. And everyone would start with the left side of the slide, enhancing the customer interactions. And that's obvious. If we can do that, then by definition, we're going to have a better experience. But we also can think about the business judgment that we're applying to the products and services and the markets that we're serving. And we can understand in real time how these markets are behaving, not at an individual level, but at a population level. And that insight of how the populations are behaving and the new risk factors that are being introduced can actually dramatically impact what we're doing around specific customer interactions. And then actually, just as importantly, we want to be able to improve the efficiency of the mid and the back office, the capability, so that customers have a better experience and they don't even know how it happened. And I'll give you a short example here. So we were hired by one of our clients in Japan. It's a telecom company. And they wanted to help one of their customers, which is an automotive company. And the automotive company specifically wanted to sell more taxis to taxi drivers. And they thought that the way to do this would be to find a way to have a taxi driver as an individual business owner drive fewer miles but make more money. And if they could do that, they could reduce carbon emissions, they could make less work, but they could make more money for the taxi driver. That sounds like a complex problem. So how do you solve it? In this particular instance, we used the information flowing through the mobile network. We don't need to know the name of anybody. We just need to know where did they start and end each journey during the day. And we can start to record movement patterns in the city. So this was happening in Tokyo. Then we could take all the event information that was available in Tokyo. Where are all the concerts, the major movements of people? Then we could take the information from the transit systems, and we could take all of the information about the timing of trains, planes, buses, cars, etc. We could know whether or not the parking decks were full. So we could take all of these different sources of data, and then we could use real-time analytics to predict every 4 minutes where somebody was going to walk out onto the street and raise their hand and say, I need a taxi. Now, if I can do that, right, that's in the efficiency side of the business. I'm trying to become more efficient. But what does it mean for the person who's waiting for a taxi? It means there's one about 30 feet away from you waiting to pick you up even before you ask. This is not a made-up story. This is a real-time project going on in Tokyo, right? And it's an answer that says, I want to create a better experience for the person taking the taxi. I want to create a better experience for the driver. And by the way, the outcome of this work is that the drivers are driving 30% fewer miles, and they're making about 20% more money each day because they're not wasting time driving around looking for people. We're telling them where the people are going to show up and start to ask for a ride. And of course, we can do that because we looked at all three of these things. So the point here is that if you're trying to design good customer experiences, you can't just think of the front office piece of the experience and just think about the marketing angle. You have to think about what delivers the experience through the ecosystem, and how are you going to enable that to change over time? Well, one of the techniques that we can use is we can use the information about what people do online and potentially what they do offline to start to understand patterns of behavior. And if we understand patterns of behavior precisely, we can start to get more precise in how we actually design the interactions and the experiences that we want to enable. So this recent research showed that 83% of the executives agreed that the digital demographics, the data that exists, the audit trail or the exhaust, the digital exhaust that you create when you're using all of your devices, actually tells us a lot about buying behaviors, even in the offline world. I'll give you another simple example. Amazon started a business 3 years ago called Amazon Media Services. Now, Amazon Media Services are not for people to buy things on Amazon. Amazon's media services are to allow people who want to sell to Amazon's customers, even in an offline environment. So let's just pretend that I wanted to sell somebody a high-end sports car. I'm probably not going to be selling that directly on their platform. But what they can tell me is, what are the behaviors of enthusiasts of sports cars on their platform? Where do they spend their time? They can also tell you where they spend their time when they're not on the Amazon platform. And so that digital exhaust, the insight they have about behavior on the platform, has turned into a $10 billion insight business for Amazon. They're going to generate $10 billion in revenue this year just telling external people outside of the Amazon family what behavior they see inside the Amazon platform in terms of video, music, shopping patterns, etc., and what that means in terms of how people behave elsewhere. We can also go beyond that. We can look at this concept of individual markets, markets of one, and in fact, moments. Because as an individual, we don't behave the same way 24/7. We actually behave differently depending on the context of what we're trying to accomplish at this point in time. And so, if we're shopping for a birthday gift, that might be a different behavior than if we're shopping for a spouse, which might be a different behavior if I'm shopping for myself. Even though I'm in the same store and I'm the same person, I have different intentions, I have different behaviors. So understanding individual needs at the speed of right now, and understanding not just their intentions and their preferences, but just as importantly, their behaviors, is something that's now possible. And we can use these insights to think about how we're going to design for the future. So I asked our team a question. I said, if we had to describe fantastic experiences, and our Accenture Interactive team and Fjord and Karmarama and some of our other teams that work on this full time said, this is what we would say, right? These are the words that would come to mind. And my question was, well, why is it so hard? What's so difficult about this? Well, the left side of the chart is pretty obvious, right? We want to enable personalization at scale, but we don't want to cross the boundary of being creepy. So there's an art there in addition to a science. We want to know what people are doing, but we don't want to be invading their privacy. We actually want to understand the individual's intentions and preferences and behaviors, but we need to do it in a way that feels natural and intuitive. That's a different amount of art in addition to the science. And then finally, we want to take advantage of all the known information so that the experiences feel smart and efficient. We don't want to ask people to tell us the same thing over and over, and we don't want to ask them to tell us things that they've told other people that they've given us permission to have access to. So if we can get their permission and ask them, we can very quickly create experiences that feel much more efficient. As an example, one of our banking clients in Spain was competing in the Brazilian market for auto loans. They were number 7 in the market out of 8, right? So not doing very well. And they looked at how people experience getting an auto loan. And they said, well, first of all, they're in the middle of a test drive, and they're enjoying the test drive. And the salesmen start seeing that, yeah, this could be a customer ready to buy. So what happens when we get back to the dealership? We get out of the car where you were having fun, and we go into our little office in the back where you're not going to have fun, right? This is not going to be a pleasant 45 minutes. But that's what it takes, because they're required as a salesperson to try and upsell you on the loan. Even if you say, I have cash and I want to pay. No, let me tell you about our financing offer, right? And by the way, to tell you about my financing offer, let me ask you to fill out these 12 forms. And so this bank said, maybe we should just do it the opposite. What we'll do is when you get in the car, before you turn the key, the sales guy's got a little app and an iPad, and he says, hey, while we're taking the drive, I'm going to be investigating some financing options for you. And before we get back to the dealership, I'll tell you what those offers are so you'll know before you finish the test drive. Could you just give me permission to access your information and sign right here? And they do. The 80% do. While you're driving the car, they've actually got all of the answers. And now they can literally tell you when you get back to the dealership, you don't even need to get out of the car, just sign one more time and you're done. You own it. They went from 7th place to 1st place in 3 months, right? Completely changed the experience because they took advantage of all the known information in the ecosystem and they didn't need to bother you for that data. It's already there. We move to the right side of the slide, things get harder. We have to start applying prediction and optimization. And what we should be doing is trying to move along the experience. Let's take the friction out of the experience and keep the pace feeling natural. Because every time you stop me and tell me I have to wait, it makes the experience less interesting. As an example, I was just flying from Atlanta, where I live, to Europe, and I was coming through our international concourse. And usually, when we're doing this, we have to stop. Even though we've done it electronically, we have to pull out our passport. Somebody's got to look at our face and look at the passport and go, yeah, it looks like it could be the same guy. Okay, I'm going to let him go on to the flight, right? And so every single person on the plane has got to go stop for 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 seconds and wait for them to flip to the right page on the passport, find the picture, line it up. Yep, okay. And it slows down the pace. So Delta decided, well, we have your picture on the passport. We have an iPad. The iPad has a camera. Why don't we just mount the iPad up on a post and put a big green light around it? And as you're walking up, the camera sees you. It goes, yep, that's the guy on the passport. And it just flashes green, and the agent goes, go on by, right? Don't slow down the process. Just keep moving. So applying real-time prediction and optimization can enable all of these experiences to feel much more natural. And then, of course, if I have an intent and I'm trying to complete that intent, what I would appreciate from you is to think about the ecosystem that you're already part of and think about how you can partner with others in the ecosystem to make my life easier, which requires now that I'm going to trade data with other people and I'm going to understand their capabilities and my capabilities, and I'm not going to always offer you my service. I'm going to offer you the right service from the ecosystem that's part of your broader journey. That creates an intense amount of trust when you do it correctly, because your customer understands you're serving them, not just the interest of your business. But it also requires a lot of change in your technology infrastructure, your data capabilities, and the frequency and the timing of the analytics that you want to do. And then finally, a well-designed experience is designed to gracefully handle the exception conditions so that people remain happy even when things are not perfect. It's really simple to do a PowerPoint design or write up on the whiteboard what a perfect experience is going to look like. But the art is handling the exceptions, because the exceptions are ones that are on Twitter and Facebook and CNBC and all of the other media when people say, I had this service failure. And of course, real life happens. They don't always go as planned. The question is, did we design the experience so that there's a failover and that we know what the exception condition in the process is going to be, and that even if somebody goes through a process where the failure was significant, they still feel pretty happy about it. They're not that upset. Again, some art, some science. But if we're trying to create a great experience, we have to think through all of these things. Now, if we're in marketing, we start talking about the 4 R's of personalization, about our ability to recognize somebody, to remember them and what they've done before, to know what's relevant in their journey and the experience they're trying to have around a specific intention, and then what we should be recommending to them. But the big movement is just not knowing what someone's trying to do, but why. What's the underlying motivation? Why are they making the selections that they've made? Why have they stated the preferences that they've stated? And then also moving to not just predicting what people are doing, but anticipating the options. Not everybody follows the same path every time. Not everybody has the same reaction to the same offer. And so if we're just trying to predict, that's a completely different level of sophistication of a business that's actually anticipating multiple options and saying, I'm going to design responses that allow me to be effective even when my prediction wasn't exactly correct. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, moving beyond just recommending what my business wants to sell you, what's my best offer to you, but advising on what's your best course of action, even if it's not buying my product or service. Right? And this is becoming an expectation as people are becoming familiar with platform economics and two-sided platforms and all the services available there. So how are they doing it? Well, of course, the big technology that enables all of this is artificial intelligence, where we can actually sense and comprehend and act and learn as we get additional types of information. And there's lots of different types of artificial intelligence. This is not all of them. There are plenty of other types of artificial intelligence. But we can use the data that's now available through these different techniques to understand and react and then design an experience that feels much more intuitive and natural. Now, if you looked back 2 to 3 years and you were trying to do this, you needed data, technology, data scientists, and then most importantly, industry expertise. And if you understood those 4 things, if you had those 4 things, you could do this. The good news is a lot of this is being productized and made available as a service. So for example, if I wanted to take a picture of this audience, and I know how to call one API from Google, Amazon, Microsoft, AliCloud, any of those would return a result for me that would count the number of people in this crowd, tell me how many were male, how many were female. It would calculate the average age of the crowd. And I could do all that without knowing one bit of data science. Why? Because these artificial intelligence are being turned into services, and they're being made available through technology in the form of open application programming interfaces. And we can access the power of these services very easily. We were preparing for Mobile World Congress, not this year, but a year ago, so about 14 months ago. And we wanted to put a demonstration at Mobile World Congress that would show how easy it was to use some of this technology. And so it actually happened to be a team from Italy that had 2 young analysts who just joined us a couple months earlier. And they said, oh, you know, we'll do one over the weekend. We'll create something. So what they did is they went out and they got some of those little outdoor Nest cameras, you know, that you can just hook up with an external battery. And they put them on each deck of the parking garage so that they could see all the car spots on that level. And then over the weekend, they used the open APIs to train the algorithm on whether the car spot was empty, it had a motorcycle, a car, or a truck. And just taught it to recognize those 4 things: empty, motorcycle, car, truck. And then they dumped all of that data into a data set, and they made it available via mobile app so that when our employees show up in the morning, the mobile app can flash them as they come into the garage and say the first open spot is on C6 if you're in a car. But if you're on a motorcycle, it's actually A3 because you can double space with another motorcycle there. It took them 1 weekend and no money to write the app. Why? They were not data scientists. They were just kids who came out of school who understand how to use the existing technology, and they used the service. So my point to you about artificial intelligence is that all of this power is available to you. The question is, what do you do with it? Well, what our clients have found out is that having the data, the technology, the data science, and the industry expertise is not enough. You can use that to do a pilot, a prototype, a proof of concept, but you can't do it if what you're trying to do is create adoption at scale. So how do we create adoption at scale? Many of our clients are starting to look at the concept of creating a digital factory. This is not a technology factory. A digital factory is a factory that imagines, builds, deploys, and then manages the adoption of a digitally enabled product or service. And so, of course, if you were going to build a digital factory, you would have technologists and people who understand data and data science, but you would also understand finance and risk and marketing and the capabilities of individual industries. So what we see is that the people who are doing experience design are getting pulled into this bigger ecosystem that says, well, actually, if I'm going to deliver an experience at scale, I'm going to have to do it using a lot of different skills, and I'm going to have to establish a North Star that's quite different. So I thought I would pick some companies that we see doing interesting work. I live in Atlanta, so I just happened to pick a bunch of the North American ones. And I picked a video of some real work that's going on at one of the cruise lines, Carnival Cruise Line. And I thought I would just show you the video of how they're trying to reinvent the guest experience. And through this video, just think for a minute about all the different types of data, the different sensors, the different interactions that we're trying to support for every passenger on a very big ship.
Last year at CES, smart homes were all the rage. This year, it's smart vacations. Cruise giant Carnival Corporation today unveiled the Ocean Medallion, a wearable device that personalizes a host of guest experiences, including sophisticated wayfinding, food and beverage on demand, an array of interactive gaming, and more. Hungry or thirsty? Forget waiting in line. With the Medallion, your order finds you. With the technology, guests can make purchases and access their staterooms without a card, touch, or tap, just like keyless door entry on the world's finest cars. The Medallion interacts with thousands of invisible sensors to personalize the vacation experience in ways never before possible. Similar to music and TV streaming services, the technology learns guests' likes and dislikes to anticipate what they'll want and when they'll want it. The Ocean Medallion will be free to cruisers beginning in 2017 on Regal Princess from Carnival's Princess Cruises brand. From CES, I'm John Bustecker.
So that was it's actually gone live now, but that was a commercial when they were just about to launch it. And it's now live on the ships. And when you go, it's not just about the individual and the sensors that we put on the passengers, but of course we also know where the crew is. And we can do population level analytics to know there are too many people at this pool, not enough people at this restaurant. We can do real-time crew rescheduling, all sorts of things that make the guest experience more interesting. Of course, the obvious question is, do guests want the medallion? Do they want to wear it? Are they willing to be tracked and have that information? And do they want it on their children? And what we find is, in fact, once they've had it, they demand it on the next trip. They absolutely don't want to have a trip without it, because the experience is so much better. No payments, no lines. They've taken the average boarding time on this ship from 48 minutes per family of 4. It usually took 48 minutes to board 4 people. Now, it takes as long as you can physically take to walk on the ship. There literally is no point at which you stop walking, because they've completely simplified the experience. But now we've got some new rules that we've got to deal with. Fjord creates the Fjord Trends document every year, and this document is to help people think about how to do good design. And so I call it the annual Christmas gift from the design community to the design community, where they think about what we've learned in the past year and what designers will need to be thinking about in the future. And of course, we've reached an inflection point, and a very important inflection point, which is lots of people have started to grab data and use it inappropriately. And lots of people have started to understand digital marketing channels, and they've used those inappropriately. And now we have a lot of noise in the system, and we have a lot of distrust. And so one of the things that they're talking about is that silence is golden. You actually have to think as a brand how to connect to consumers when they don't want to be barraged with messages. They want a quieter set of interactions. They want a more intuitive set of experiences. They don't always need to know that your brand is in the middle of an experience in order for them to appreciate the fact that the brand creates the experience. So if you're interested, the Fjords Trends documents are out there on the internet. I would look back through the last 3-4 years. There's always something interesting in these trends documents about how data is being used, the inclusivity paradox, etc. So I would just bring those to your attention. But I guess I would end by saying that this is going to be an interesting opportunity for you to first listen to what others are doing. Secondly, to learn what's possible. And then hopefully to lead, go taking it into your markets. Because there is no better time to be in the business of serving clients. We have so many tools and techniques available today that weren't here even a couple of years ago. And now we have them at scale, at relatively low cost, and pervasive. So I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the day. I'll look forward to talking to you at the break and later this afternoon. Thanks a lot.